Inflation affects every type of product or service. It can rise because of demand, production, costs, and when the distributor just decides to increase prices because they can. There is a lot to inflation, how it works, and how it affects the economy, especially consumers. But before we get into how inflation works, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on your notifications to help support our channel. Now, let's jump right in. So, what is inflation? Inflation measures the rate of increasing prices of goods and services in an economy. Basically, inflation looks at how much prices are going up in a particular area. Inflation can cause higher prices for both need items and want items. That means inflation affects entertainment purchases just as much as it does necessities like food, which can negatively affect society. Inflation can affect nearly every product or service: housing, food, medical care, and even utilities. It's responsible for increased prices for cosmetics, automobiles, jewelry, you name it. When inflation starts significantly affecting all parts of the economy, consumers and businesses alike become concerned about how it might affect them if it goes up too much. Centralized banks of developed economies, like our Federal Reserve here in the US, regularly assess inflation. The Federal Reserve has an inflation target of about 2%. In simpler terms, regular annual inflation of 2% is considered stable. However, if inflation prices rise too much or too quickly, the Fed will adjust its monetary policy to counteract it. Why is inflation concerning? Inflation can be a concern because it makes today's saved money less valuable tomorrow. Inflation lessens a buyer's purchasing power, can interfere with our ability to retire, and can even affect whether or not someone can ever purchase a home. For example, if your savings earn 5%, whether from stocks and bonds, equity, etc., but inflation was 3%, you actually only earned 2%. What's more, because individual groups of companies can cause inflation, it can wind up being extremely disproportionate to wages and demand. What drives inflation? Various factors can drive inflation. It typically results from increased production costs or demand. However, it can also result from disproportionate price increases on the part of businesses. Let's dive into those three main causes. 1. Cost push inflation. Cost push inflation happens when prices increase because of production costs. It costs more to make the production because of materials or wages, so manufacturers increase their prices. The demand is unchanged, but supply is down due to the higher production costs. So, the additional production costs hit consumers through higher prices on finished goods. An indicator of cost push inflation can be increased commodity prices like oil or metals. For example, if steel prices rise, companies that use steel might increase their product prices. Suppose the demand doesn't match the demand for copper. In that case, businesses will pass on the higher raw material costs to consumers. The result is higher consumer prices but no increased demand. Wages also affect production costs and can be the biggest expense for businesses. When a company feels it needs to increase its prices to account for increased wages, it's still cost-push inflation. While successful businesses should always account for wages, companies that have been lowballing their wages may suddenly increase their prices to keep up with a demand for higher employee pay. Natural disasters can also drive cost-push inflation. For example, suppose a hurricane kills a corn crop. In that case, prices can rise across the board since we use corn in many products. 2. Demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation occurs when strong consumer demand for a product or service drives up prices. A surge in demand for several goods across an economy can increase prices because companies want to make more. In the short term, this isn't a problem. However, continued demand can affect the economy and increase costs for other goods, resulting in demand pull inflation. Consumer confidence can be high when unemployment is low and wages are up, which can cause increased spending. Economic expansion directly affects consumer spending in an economy, causing high demand for products and services. The available supply decreases as the demand increases. When fewer items are available, consumers can be willing to pay more for them. The result is higher prices due to demand pull inflation. It's important to note that too sharp an increase in prices will drive away consumers. Think of the PlayStation 5. The scarcity increased demand and people were willing to pay the hefty price tag. However, that demand has since gone down, which is common as the newness of a product disappears. So, you can see that companies also play a role in inflation, especially when manufacturing popular products. A company could raise prices simply because consumers are willing to pay more. Corporations also increase prices freely when the product or service for sale is something consumers require for everyday life, like oil and gas. It's that universal demand that corporations leverage against consumers to raise prices. Thanks for watching, and remember to turn on our channel's notifications. You don't want to miss our next video.